Memories can be difficult things, my friends. Who amongst us hasn't felt the pang of loss when we stop and take a good, hard look back on our lives? All of those difficult choices. Nobody can get all of them right. Everybody can lament a road not taken. And nobody should have to look, to really look. As you lay in bed at night and your thoughts drift back to all those painful moments, you can always be thankful that you aren't really seeing it. The past can remain in your mind an abstraction, untouchable, and never really known. Welcome to episode 10 of Not Now, Not Here. In this week's episode, a pair of newlyweds are off on an adventure, starting their new lives together. The hope and optimism they feel is quickly and quietly taken from them. And when the bride takes a look back in the mirror, she finds a terrifying other world. A world where the fears of what she is leaving behind become real enough to see, real enough to look right back. So turn down the lights, close your windows and doors, and sit back. Prepare to enter a world that is not now, not here. Looking back. It was the worst story they'd ever heard, and the townsfolk knew a thing or two about stories. That was why they left the burnt car sitting at the bottom of the ravine, overturned like a monument too significant to ever be removed. When out-of-towners came through, they would ask, "What's that car doing down there? Shouldn't somebody get rid of it?" You could see it plain as day when you crossed the bridge by the lumberyard, an eyesore, sitting there like a dead animal, weeds growing out of its wheel wells. Townsfolk would sigh, shake their heads, and then solemnly and dutifully relay the story. They were newlyweds, crossing the country on their honeymoon, heading out west. Like so many others, they'd seen the curves of Highway 9 on the map and thought, "Oh, how lovely! The wilderness, the rolling hills, the verdant dales." They never stopped to consider the tedium of each turn, or the hours it would take to wind their way down that tarred road. Even locals avoided Highway 9 when they could. The interstate was faster and more reliable. A gas station every 10 miles. Telephones and restaurants and people. Things you take for granted on a honeymoon. Not that the road had anything to do with it. It didn't. People say it was the car. The car and that girl, the wife. The important thing to remember is that once you're on Highway 9, there's no way to quit it. There's no way on or off other than to keep going until you reach a town, which can take hours. And sometimes, those hours can be the longest hours of your life. So here were these newlyweds in a beat-up blue Honda, rolling their way along, doing whatever newlyweds do, when the girl takes a good, hard look in the rearview mirror. All of the color drains out of her face. She turns to look at the back seat, then back at the mirror. What she sees, she can't believe. She twists her head this way and that so often that her husband asks, "What is it?" No other cars are on the road, so he can't figure out why she keeps looking back. "My father's in the back seat," she says. The husband turns and looks in the back. "No, he isn't." "In the mirror," she says. "Only in the mirror." The man takes a look in the mirror and about wrecks the car. Sure enough, the girl's elderly father is there, his bald head shining, his wrinkled old face looking around the car, as if some genie had popped him there after a wish. They stop the car on the side of the road and both take a good long look. They can't hear him or smell him or touch him, but they can see him in the mirror. For all his age, he looks like a lost little boy. Nothing they say or do gets his attention either. It's as if he's in a different world, a world the newlyweds can only see through the mirror.
"How is this possible?"
the husband asks.
"I don't know. Is that really him? Can that really be him?"
It takes a little while, but they decide that they aren't crazy. After all, they're both seeing the same thing. And who ever heard of two people having the same hallucination? There was no cell phone reception in the hills. Otherwise, they might have tried to call the girl's father right then and there. The last they'd talked to him, he was at his house back east, enjoying his retirement.
"We'll drive to the next town," the husband says. "We'll see if other people can see him in the mirror, too. And then we can call your father."
The wife nods in agreement.
This is insane.
So they drive as fast as the little Honda will go. But on Highway 9 there are twists and turns, and they never seem to get anywhere. Suddenly the lush green hills don't seem so verdant. The wife looks in the mirror the whole time, while the husband watches the road and the speedometer, wishing they'd taken the interstate instead. All of a sudden, the wife gasps and twists to get a new angle in the mirror. She grabs it and twists it, trying to get a better view.
"What?" the husband asks. "What is it?" "Somebody else just appeared," she says.
"How?" the husband asks. They're going 70 miles an hour down the highway. How could anybody get into the car while it was moving?
"It's a man,"
the wife says.
"He's wearing all white, sitting right next to Dad. I think they're talking. I can't see. He's wearing some kind of mask over his mouth. He's... Oh, God!"
She crawls into the back seat, screaming and thrashing like a trapped bobcat, kicking the doors and clawing at the seats.
"Hey!"
Still driving, the husband looks in the mirror. He doesn't see his wife. Instead, he sees into that other world, the world where the father is in the back. What he sees stops him cold. There's a man in a white suit, sure enough. He's dressed like a surgeon, a knife in his hand, and he's stabbing the wife's father over and over, his arm like a piston. The father looks as if he's screaming, a terrified and glossy look in his eyes. There's blood everywhere, dripping down the windows and soaking into the upholstery, and the man in white has laugh lines etched around his eyes. All of this is only in the mirror, of course. When the husband looks to the back seat with his own eyes, he only sees his wife screaming and spitting. He almost drives off the road, but manages to stop the car on the dirt shoulder. He has to drag his wife out of the back seat, still kicking. He leaves her on the side of the road, screaming and crying, and goes back to the car to look in the mirror. In the mirror, the father is sprawled out in the back seat, and the man in white is on top of him, cutting into his stomach with what looks like a hunting knife, like an operation. The father's eyes are glossy and open wide. As the husband watches, the man in white plucks one of the father's dark, dripping organs and dangles it at the mirror where the husband can see. There are little specks of blood on his white surgical mask. You can almost hear the laughter in his eyes. The husband stumbles onto the blacktop. Outside, his wife is vomiting on the shoulder. Neither of them knows what to do.
Oh, it's not real.
The husband says.
It's not the real world. We have to get the police.
She says.
It's some other world. A mirror world. It can't really be happening. We need a telephone. We have to call for help. We have to call the police. The police.
The husband says.
Yeah, the police.
But neither of them wants to go anywhere near the car. There's no point in walking. It's Highway 9, right? There are no houses out there. The newlyweds can see that plain enough. And they could wait there on the shoulder all day before another car comes along. So they sit there, both of them shaking. Eventually, the husband says,
"We'll have to drive."
The wife looks at the car.
"I don't want to go back in there. Wait here,"
the husband says. He goes back to the car and, careful not to look into it, rips that rearview mirror off the windshield. He tosses it into the back seat.
"We won't look," he says. "We'll drive to the next town and we won't look."
It takes some coaxing, but the husband gets his wife back into the car, and they start driving again. The husband sits rigid, his hands clenched on the wheel. The wife sits sideways in the front seat, looking into the back. The husband can tell she's imagining bloodstains, listening for screams, picturing those laughing eyes and that white mask. The husband drives as fast as the little car will go.
"It wasn't real,"
the husband says.
"Just because we saw the same thing doesn't mean it really happened. We can't leave him,"
the wife says.
"We can't leave him bleeding back there." "Did you hear me? It wasn't real. He's not bleeding. He's not back there. That's not real. In the real world, he's sitting on his front porch yelling at the neighbor's cats. You saw it."
The wife says.
"You saw him. We have to help him. Help him how? He's not here."
They're shouting so much, they hardly notice the miles flying by. Pretty soon, they're close to town. They don't know it, of course, but they're only about 2 miles out when things go wrong, when the wife completely loses it. You can't blame her, really. There's no telling what was going through her mind. Put yourself in her shoes. You're newly married, driving halfway across the country to start a new life, when you see your dear old pa getting ripped apart by some kind of demented, white-suited madman. Thinking about it is too much for her. Mid-conversation, the wife jumps into the back seat again. She's calmer this time, moving quickly and with purpose. She picks up the mirror and holds it up to her face.
"Don't!"
the husband shouts.
"Don't look at it! I'm not just going to leave him back here to die!"
the wife shouts.
"I'm not going to..."
Whatever she sees shuts her up. She holds the mirror in front of her face, but it isn't her face looking back at her. She might have been seeing the man in white, his terrible eyes looking back at her. Or she might have been seeing blood and guts strewn about the back seat, intestines dangling from the headrests like tinsel on a Christmas tree. Nobody really knows what she sees, not even her husband. He turns around as he's driving, sees his wife's face, and, without thinking, snatches the mirror out of her hand and tosses it out the window. The wife watches it go. When she hears the glass shatter and sees the mirror bounce down the highway, she erupts in a fit of shouts and fists. It was as if her husband had picked up her father and thrown him out the window instead of just a mirror. She starts hitting her husband, biting him and clawing at him, all from the back seat.
"How could you do that? How could you? I can't leave him!
At this point, they come around the bend just outside of town. If the wife could have kept it together for another 30 seconds, they would have made it. Instead, when she claws at her husband's face, he loses control of the car. They drift off the road and bounce down into the ditch, swinging and fishtailing through the grass. The husband tries to get the car back on the road, but all he accomplishes is to drive one of the wheels up the safety railing of the bridge, over the ravine. The car flips and bounces down the rocks, 50 feet, landing upside down next to the creek. Nobody sees it happen, but the guys at the lumberyard that day hear it. 2 or 3 of them climb down when they see the wrecked car billowing smoke. They manage to pull the husband out, bleeding but still alive. The wife, though, well, there isn't much left of her to pull out. The back end of the car is totally crushed. The husband is in the hospital for a week. Critical condition. Doctors afraid to move him to a larger hospital. He's awake long enough to tell police the story about the mirror and the man in white. He begs to see his wife and asks to call her father. The girl's father is as shocked as anybody. He's not dead or hurt or anything. He's right where they left him, in his house back east. When the police tell the husband that his wife's father is fine, the husband laughs and laughs. A few days later, he dies, still chuckling, laugh lines etched into his eyes. According to the police, the husband and wife had a simple fight while they were driving. The husband lost control and the car flipped into the ravine. The report doesn't mention anything about a mirror or a man in white. They didn't want any trouble. A simple lie is better than a complicated truth, at least according to the police. Everybody knows about it, though. You can't keep a story like that a secret. Most folks suppose it was some sort of hallucination, that the husband and wife were really on drugs, having a bad trip. Some people, though, say they've seen the man in white themselves, in the bathroom mirror or in a mirror hanging in their closet. They always say that if you do see the man in white, you've got to break the mirror, or what you see will actually come to pass. But that's all talk. Nobody believes stories like that, do they? That car's still there, too. Either the city doesn't have the funds to haul it out of there, or there isn't a municipal worker who wants to go near it. Out-of-towners ask about it when they pass through, and the locals always tell them. The out-of-towners, perhaps a little pale, perhaps wishing they hadn't asked about the wreck at the bottom of the ravine, quietly get back into their cars and fix their eyes on the road, looking desperately forward. Someone should move that car, they say. But no one will. It'll sit there for years to come, like an old headstone, weathering, growing weeds, becoming part of the landscape. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. We hope you found it as troubling to hear as we found it to make. Be sure to tune in next week for another bloody installment. This week's episode features music by Kevin MacLeod. The songs Echoes of Time version 2, Static Motion, and On the Shore are used under the Creative Commons license and can be found at incompetech.com. You can also visit notnowNotHere.com for more information about the music, including legal information and links to all the songs you've just heard. Other music was provided by jewelbeat.com. Both of these sites are great if you need music for any projects you are working on. Yet other sounds came from freesound.org, a great site with lots to offer those of us who crave noise. This podcast is written and performed by Phillip Kohtz. If you like any of the stories you hear on the show, you can read them or download them for free online. You can find all of the stories published in a variety of digital formats, corresponding artwork, poetry, our blog, and also news about future releases at notnownothere.com. You can also find us on Twitter and probably some other places. If you like what we're doing, please spread the word, and be sure to stop by our site and give us your feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts, opinions, criticisms, and ideas. Until next week, dear listeners, stay cool, and may the wind be ever at your back.